overseas. Kia ora.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Oh my goodness, that's loud. I know, and it's not even me this time. Mr. Chair, I'm very happy to take a call on the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill, and I want to begin perhaps just by canvassing a few of the principles behind the Student Loan Scheme. And the Labour Party, of course, is very proud of the track record that we have when it comes to the Student Loan Scheme. The Student Loan Scheme is put in place to ensure that financial barriers do not prevent people from participating in tertiary education. And that is one of the reasons why the Labour Party took a number of steps during the term that we were in government to make student loan schemes repayment faster, which is one of the things that this bill purports to want to do. Whether or not, in fact, it's going to do that is the subject of some comments that I'm going to make shortly. But we wanted students to get through or graduates to get through their debts faster, to be able to get on with their lives, and that's one of the reasons why we made student loans interest-free. Now, from memory, the average royal, no, actually, so to win an election, well, this just highlights the National Party's stance on interest-free student loans, doesn't it? Because one moment, John Key says he's going to fight interest-free student loans with every bone in his body. The next minute he says that shonky economics, was that what it was? Was shonky economics? But it was good politics. And so now it's good politics for them to support it. But in their heart of hearts, they don't believe in interest-free student loans. They don't believe in the policy that has seen the average repayment times for student loans more or less half. So here, this bill that they're bringing to the House today, which they claim is going to result in faster repayment times for student loans, that's what they say this bill's going to do, and yet they're opposed to the very policy that resulted in much faster repayments for student loans. That was interest-free student loans. But coming back to the bill, I'm not going to be distracted by that unruly lot over there. As the wheels start spinning off the government, you can see the desperation in their eyes, but I won't be distracted by that, because on this side of the House, we do believe in faster repayment times for student loans, and that's one of the reasons why the amendment put forward by Grant Robertson is a very sensible one. Because the advice that the government have received is that by reducing the repayment holiday from 3 years to 1, it will actually increase the amount of debt. It will increase the amount of debt. Now, of course, that's something this government are quite happy with. They don't really mind about debt on every number of levels, whether it's student loan debt, current account debt, government debt. This government are happy to see it all increase. They want to borrow, more borrowing. That's what this government are all for. Doesn't matter who's doing the borrowing, whether it's people with student loans, whether it's the Crown, whether it's households. Borrow is the message that we get from this government. Borrow. We're not going to borrow our way out of recession, but that's what this government seem to think. Because this amendment that the government are proposing to make in this bill will increase the amount of debt. That's not my view, that's what the Treasury are telling them. The Treasury are telling them that this is going to result in more debt. More debt, and yet they're going to go ahead. Because let's be clear about what this is. This is all about the national government looking like they're doing something. Actually, it's not really going to make a huge amount of difference, other than the fact that it's going to result in more debt. So to move to the amendment put forward by my colleague Grant Robertson, which I fully support, to restore the repayment holiday back to 3 years, I believe that this is a very pragmatic decision. And I'm really looking forward to the contribution from Peter Dunn on this. I suspect it's going to be the defining part of this debate will be the contribution from Peter Dunn, because he was very clear in 2007 that he thought that extending the repayment holiday from 1 year to 3 years was very sensible. It was pragmatic. That's what Peter Dunn was saying at the time. He seems to have changed his tune. I'll be very interested to see how Peter Dunn votes on Grant Robertson's amendment. Because if Peter Dunn votes against the amendment put forward by Grant Robertson, that will simply confirm what everybody suspects, that Peter Dunn's view of pragmatism is whatever it will take to keep his ministerial warrant. That's Peter Dunn's view of pragmatism. I'm looking forward to him proving us wrong. To Peter Dunn coming to the House and voting in favour of Grant Robertson's amendment, and if he does do that and that amendment passes, the Labour Party will vote for the rest of the bill, because we actually don't have a problem with the rest of the bill, but we do have a problem with this provision in the bill that extends the repayment holiday, the amount of time someone can spend overseas without having to worry about repayments, Mr Chair,
Chris Hipkins,
from 1 year to 3 years, because we don't think it's going to work. Now, John Key stood in the Westpac Stadium in Wellington and lamented the fact that 30,000 New Zealanders left every year. Now, of course, we've got more New Zealanders leaving New Zealand every year now than that. In fact, we're at record levels of people leaving New Zealand, and some of the people who are leaving New Zealand are recent graduates. They're recent graduates going off to do their OE. It's a bit of a rite of passage for New Zealanders. That's something that we encourage. We just want them to come back. It's good to do an OE because you get a whole lot of experience that you might not get in New Zealand. And if you're a medical graduate, for example, working for a few years in an overseas hospital is going to give you exposure and to a whole lot of different things, experience that you might not get in New Zealand. That's great. That is great. We should pay for it, Maggie Barry, because they'll be better doctors when they come back to New Zealand. They'll be better doctors when they come back to New Zealand. But under this government, they don't care about getting them back to New Zealand. They're quite happy to say, stay there. After training them, after spending all that money to train them, this government would rather have them stay overseas than come back to New Zealand. We in the Labour Party want them to come back to New Zealand. We don't want to see the trend continue as it has under this national government, under John Key's government, for more and more New Zealanders every year to leave the country and not come back. They are not coming back because this government is not giving them any hope that the future is going to be better for them when they do come back. Now, this repayment holiday may only seem like a small thing, but if we've got graduates overseas seeing penalties starting to rack up while they're away, that will act as a major disincentive for them returning to New Zealand, and that is the very last thing we should be doing. Now, for a lot of our graduates, 1 year simply isn't enough in terms of the time, because they might want to do a bit of work, they might want to have a bit of a holiday, they might want to visit a couple of different countries, and a year isn't probably enough. 3 years is adequate time. And after that time, I think it's fair for New Zealanders to say, hey, you've had your university education or your tertiary education of whatever variety is, you've had your OE, you've had your overseas experience, we now want you to come back and contribute back to New Zealand, and if you don't do that, we expect you to start making repayments from wherever you are to get your loan balance back under control, to start paying off your student loan. That's very reasonable, very fair. The Labour Party supports that. But 1 year, requiring people to do that after 1 year is going to lead to more students in default, more students, graduates that is, more graduates clocking up debts and clocking up penalties, and that is going to act as a disincentive to them coming home. And that is one of the reasons why the amendment put forward by Grant Robertson is a very, very sensible amendment, a pragmatic decision, recognising that many young New Zealanders take that extended period overseas. That was what Peter Dunn said when he supported the 3 years before he went back to supporting the 1 year in the space of, 3 or 4 years. But, you know, that's okay. That's Peter Dunn. I mean, as I said, Peter Dunn's view of pragmatism is whatever keeps his job. But I'm looking forward to him proving us wrong. I'm looking forward to the significant contributions from the Māori Party. I noticed that we don't sort of seem to hear so much from the Māori Party these days. It could have something to do with the fact they're not allowed to read their speeches anymore. They've kind of been unplugged, so to speak, and so we don't tend to hear quite so much from the Māori Party. I'm looking forward to the contributions of Mr Banks, who I'm sure will, the ACT Party's Mr Banks, who I'm sure will argue that we should do away with student loans altogether, and it should be the ACT Party view of Darwinism, survival of the fittest, and whoever's got the most money should get the tertiary education, everyone else should just join the line. So moving on to some of the further substance of the bill, I must admit I was intrigued by the Minister's amendment, Peter Dunn's amendment. It drew my attention to the fact that that this... Well, actually, it's a commencement clause that I was about to talk about, so I'll talk about that when we get to that part of the debate. But I'm interested in the fact that one of these provisions comes into effect retrospectively, and that's pretty unusual, and I'll be interested to hear the justification for why we're imposing a retrospective clause in this bill. I'll get to that I'll get to that part of the debate when we come to it. So just moving back to the points of principle that I was raising at the very beginning, the Labour Party, of course, supports efforts to make the student loan scheme more efficient. We think that the student loan scheme is a very important way that we can ensure that everybody can participate in tertiary education, make a brighter future for themselves, Students, graduates should not be shirking their responsibilities to make repayments, but in order, the quid pro quo from that arrangement is that we have to make sure those repayment arrangements are fair. Removing the interest was fair. This is not fair.
David Bennett.